I never imagined I'd live to see the day my own daughter screamed at me like a stranger, her face red, her voice shaking with rage, because I refused to hand her the money I earned selling the house I built with my bare hands. And even less did I think my son, my firstborn, the boy I once carried in my arms, would raise his hand against me. It wasn't just an argument that night. It was a storm, one that ended with me on the floor. My left hand twisted beneath me, the sound of bone cracking echoing louder than their shouting. The pain came in waves, sharp, pulsing, alive. For a few seconds, I couldn't tell if the sound I'd just heard was my bone snapping or my heart giving out. Maybe both. The kitchen tiles felt colder than they ever had before, pressing into my cheek as I tried to breathe through the shock. Somewhere above me, the clock kept ticking, steady, unbothered, like the world didn't care that mine had just collapsed. The farmhouse was quiet now, but the air still trembled with what had just happened. My home, the one Robert and I built with sweat and laughter and love, suddenly smelled of lilacs, dust, and something else I couldn't name. Something bitter, something like betrayal. I tried to push myself up with my right hand, but the left refused to move. It hung there at an angle that looked wrong even through the blur of tears. Every movement sent a sting so sharp it blurred my vision, and yet I still turned toward the door, half expecting Luke to walk back and say he was sorry. He didn't. Through the cracked window, I could still see the faint red glow of Vanessa's car taillights vanishing down the gravel path. She'd left first, slamming the door so hard a picture fell from the wall. I could still hear her voice echoing in my head. This isn't how families treat each other. No, it wasn't. But I wasn't the one who'd forgotten what family meant. Luke had stayed behind, pacing like a storm trapped in human form. His eyes, those same blue eyes that once begged me for bedtime stories, were now filled with something colder than anger. When I told him I wasn't giving them the money, he laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't belong to the person you love. And then before I could blink, he was close, too close. His hand grabbed my wrist, yanked, and the rest happened in a blur of shouting and falling and pain. Now, lying here, I thought of the first time I'd ever held him. The tiny body that fit against my chest, the way he used to hold my finger like it was the only thing keeping him safe. How does love grow teeth? How does it turn into this? The phone was on the counter just a few feet away, glowing faintly in the dark. I started crawling, dragging myself across the floor, my breath shallow, my body trembling. Every inch felt like a mile. The tiles were slick with spilled tea, and somewhere in that mess was the broken mug that had been Robert's favorite. The one that said, "World's Best Dad." I reached for the phone, my fingers slipping once before I caught it. The screen lit up, reflecting my face, pale, wet, unfamiliar. I dialed one name, Clara. Evelyn? "What's wrong, honey?" Her voice, steady, warm, the only kind thing in that moment, made me crumble. "I fell," I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew she'd hear the lie in my tone. "My hand, I think it's broken. I'm coming right now." "Don't move," the call ended. I set the phone down beside me and listened to the silence. Outside, the wind pushed against the window pane, and the old oak tree groaned in the dark. Somewhere far away, a dog barked, ordinary sounds that made the night feel cruelly normal. When Clara arrived, the headlights of her car swept through the room, lighting up everything the darkness had tried to hide: the overturned chair, the shattered mug, the faint smear of blood near the table leg. Her footsteps rushed toward me, then stopped short. "Oh, Evelyn," she breathed, dropping to her knees. She reached for my hand, but I flinched. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're going to get you help." The ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and motion. Clara kept talking to keep me awake, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. I stared out the window at the dark fields sliding by, the same fields Robert once plowed every spring. I used to think those acres made us safe, but safety, I realized, is just another illusion, like believing children stay children forever. Under the sterile white lights of the emergency room, everything looked too clean for the kind of mess I carried inside. A nurse asked me how it happened. I said I slipped. She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. They gave me something for the pain, wrapped my hand in gauze, and said I'd need a cast in the morning. When the police arrived, their voices were calm, professional, but their eyes told a story of their own, one they'd probably seen too many times. "Mrs. Carter," one of them asked gently, "do you feel safe staying here tonight?" I stared at my bandaged hand, then at Clara beside me, her face pale, eyes fierce. Safe? That word felt foreign now. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to pretend this was all some terrible misunderstanding, that my children would come back and apologize and we'd fix what was broken. But deep down, I knew better. I met the officer's gaze and whispered, "No, but I can't leave." He frowned slightly. "Why not, ma'am?" I turned my head toward the window, the night still waiting outside, dark and endless, and let the truth slip out like a secret I'd been holding too long. Because there's something they don't know yet. The room fell silent. Even the beeping monitor seemed to pause. Whatever came next, I knew this was only the beginning, and the storm that had shattered my bones was about to meet something stronger than anger. It was going to meet me. When I finally closed my eyes that night in the hospital, I didn't dream of pain. I dreamed of beginnings. The year was 1985, a spring morning so bright it felt painted by hand. Robert and I stood on a patch of land in Maple Hollow, the air smelling of wet soil and apple blossoms. He held the deed in one hand, my fingers in the other, and said with that quiet, confident grin of his, "One day, this land will take care of you, Evie, even when I can't." I laughed then, not because I didn't believe him, but because I couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't there to make everything right. We built that farmhouse board by board, second-hand lumber and stubborn love holding it together. The walls weren't perfect. They leaned a little, the floors creaked, but it was ours. The kind of place where Sunday mornings smelled of cinnamon rolls, and the nights echoed with children's laughter and the hum of cicadas outside. Vanessa came first, tiny and delicate, with Robert's dark eyes and a will stronger than mine. 2 years later came Luke, loud and restless, always covered in mud and questions. Our days blurred into a rhythm of small joys, hayrides at sunset, bedtime stories under quilts, and whispered promises that we'll always stay close. I can still see them, running barefoot through the fields, chasing fireflies with jars that glowed like little lanterns of hope. Back then, money meant nothing. We measured wealth in laughter, not bills, but time has a cruel way of turning gold to dust. When Robert got sick, the world shrank to hospital rooms and unpaid bills. He fought hard, but the illness took more than his strength. It took our future. When he died, the silence in that house was deafening. Even the walls seemed to sag under the weight of his absence. The debts came next: farm taxes, maintenance, repairs. I tried to hold everything together. I sold the tractor, then the cattle, took on work at the local library just to keep the lights on. Vanessa left for the city not long after the funeral, chasing a better life. She met Derek, smooth talker, quick smile, the kind of man who could make you forget to count the cost until it was too late. Luke stayed for a while, helping on and off, but grief turned him wild. He dropped out of college, said school was a waste, and took a mechanic job 3 towns over. Calls came less often, visits even less. Still, every night I left their rooms just as they were. The drawings taped to the walls, the trophies collecting dust, the smell of old detergent still lingering in their clothes. Sometimes I'd walk past Luke's room and whisper goodnight, out of habit. Other times, I'd sit on Vanessa's bed and run my fingers over the quilt her grandmother made, pretending for a moment that they were still my babies, still innocent enough to believe in forever. Their laughter once filled these halls, I used to tell myself, like saying it could somehow make it true again. Years slipped by quietly. Winters grew colder, repairs costlier, and my body slower. Still, I refused to sell. That farm wasn't just land, it was Robert's promise made real, but dreams, like buildings, have lifespans. The roof began to leak, the foundation cracked, and my savings thinned to nothing. I'd stand at the window some nights, watching the fields sway under moonlight and think, maybe it's time. And then Lydia's voice came back to me. My sister, gone too soon from the cancer that ravaged her body, but never her spirit. Before she passed, she once said, "You spend your life giving. Evie, just make sure you give in a way that outlives you." That's when the idea was born, the Lydia Grace Fund, a small charity for women who couldn't afford treatment. A way to turn my grief into something that healed others. I didn't want the farm to die with me. I wanted it to bloom again, just in a different form. When the realtor called saying someone was willing to pay $190,000, my heart clenched, half relief, half heartbreak. That number wasn't just money. It was a lifetime's worth of memories given a price tag. But I signed the papers, whispering, "Robert, I hope this is what you meant when you said the land would take care of me." That evening, I brewed tea, sat by the window, and watched the golden light fade over the fields one last time. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not happiness exactly, but the quiet kind of peace that feels like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. The phone rang just as the sun dipped below the eye. "Trees. Mrs. Carter," the bank attorney said. "The sale's been processed. By tomorrow morning, the funds, all $190,000, will be in your account." I thanked him softly, setting the receiver down with trembling fingers. My heart fluttered with both fear and excitement. I imagined new bookshelves, a repaired roof, maybe even a few volunteers to help start the foundation. I stood, poured another cup of tea, and turned toward the window to watch the evening settle in. That's when something shifted. Something subtle, the faintest rustle outside. At first, I thought it was the wind brushing the rose bush, but then I saw it, a shadow near the porch, just at the edge of the light, too tall for a branch, too still for the wind. I froze. The curtain swayed slightly, and I felt that strange, instinctive chill, the one that tells you when you're not alone. Whoever it was didn't move, just watched. My teacup trembled in my hand as I whispered into the quiet, "Robert, if you're still watching over me, keep me strong, because I think the storm's coming home." The morning after the sale went through, the house felt lighter, emptier too, but in a peaceful way. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up worried about bills or broken gutters. I brewed my tea, opened the curtains, and watched sunlight spill across the fields like gold dust. I told myself, maybe now I can finally rest. But peace never lingers long when greed starts sniffing the air. By afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Soft, hesitant, almost polite. When I opened it, Vanessa stood there smiling too wide, holding a bouquet of lilies. "Surprise, Mom," she said brightly. "I just thought, you shouldn't be alone today." It had been nearly 4 months since her last visit, 4 months of unanswered calls and vague excuses. Now here she was, wearing perfume I couldn't afford and a sympathy I didn't trust. "Oh, honey," I said, forcing a smile as she leaned in for a hug. Her arms wrapped around me just a second too tightly, as if rehearsed. "What's the occasion?" She laughed. "Do I need one? You sold the farm. That's a huge milestone. I figured we could celebrate. You deserve it." The word celebrate hung in the air like perfume, sweet but suffocating. Still, I let her in. Old habits die hard, especially the one where a mother wants to believe her children mean well. We spent the afternoon pretending. She complimented the curtains, asked about my garden, and poured tea as if she hadn't once called this house a dead weight. Then came the questions, soft at first, like the tip of a knife pressing before it cuts. "So, how's the sale process? All wrapped up?" "Yes, dear." "That's wonderful. Did the payment go smoothly?" "You must feel so relieved." I nodded, watching her eyes, not her smile. She wasn't listening to my answers. She was calculating them. When she wasn't talking, she was texting. The screen flashed again and again. Derek's name. I caught it once, reflected faintly in the window. Her laughter had a rhythm, one that stopped every time her phone buzzed. By evening, she was slicing vegetables in my kitchen, acting like she'd never left. "You know," she said casually, "Dad would be so proud." Finally, his hard work paying off for all of us. She turned and smiled, but her tone had shifted. There was something rehearsed behind it. "All of us?" I asked. She shrugged too quickly. Well, yes, it's family money. I mean, you know how Dad always said the farm belonged to everyone? The knife in her hand glinted in the warm kitchen light. I set down my teacup slowly. No, Vanessa, it's not inheritance. It's my retirement. For a moment, silence filled the room, the kind that hums with unspoken anger. Her jaw tightened, just barely. Of course, she said after a beat, her voice sugar again. I didn't mean anything by it. But something had cracked, not loud, not visible, but deep. I could feel it. She left the next morning with another hug, the kind that ends before it begins. I'll bring Luke by soon, she said lightly. He's been meaning to visit too. The way she said meaning to made it sound like a warning, and she was right. 3 days later, Luke showed up. He didn't knock. Just walked in, boots heavy, smelling faintly of oil and cheap whiskey. Hey, Ma, he said, voice casual, eyes scanning the room like a stranger checking for valuables. Vanessa said you were missing me. I smiled politely, even as dread settled in my stomach. Always, Luke. It's been too long. He sat at the table, tapping his fingers on the wood. Heard the farm sold. You must be sitting nice now. The words were a test, one I'd learned not to take. It was time, I said softly. Too much work for one person. And I have plans for it. A small foundation in your Aunt Lydia's name. He raised an eyebrow. A foundation? You mean like a charity? Yes, he leaned back, scoffing. You're telling me you sold the land Dad left us to give it away? I met his stare. I'm giving it purpose, Luke. There's a difference. For a moment I saw it. The boy he used to be. The one who'd cry when he skinned his knee, who used to say he'd build me a bigger barn someday. But then the sneer returned, and he reached for the beer can in his pocket. Dinner that night was a strange theater. 3 actors pretending to play a family. Vanessa had returned, her voice honey-sweet. Luke cracked jokes that didn't land. I laughed politely, but the air was thick. Every word had a hidden question. Every smile felt like an interrogation. When I excused myself to fetch dessert, I saw Vanessa glance at her phone again. This time she didn't hide it. I caught Derek's name and part of the message, ask about transfer confirmation. My heart sank. They weren't visiting. They were circling. Later, after they left, I locked the door and turned off the lights. The house sank into silence, the kind that hums in your bones. I made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink, just to have something to hold. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes. That's when I heard it. Faint voices near the porch. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then, through the thin curtain, I caught the low rumble of Luke's voice. She's lying, he said. The money's in her account. We just need to make her sign. Vanessa's reply was softer, trembling. Luke, maybe we should wait. Wait for what? Until Derek loses his chance? We'll do it this week. My hand tightened around the mug. The world tilted, just slightly. For the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. Love wasn't what made family. Loyalty was, and mine had just run out. Morning came quietly, too quietly, the kind of silence that feels staged, like the world is holding its breath. I woke to the sound of footsteps in the kitchen. Cups clinking, soft laughter that didn't belong here anymore. They were back. When I walked in, Vanessa was already setting the table, smiling through a sweetness that tasted like poison. Luke leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes cold. Morning, Mom, Vanessa chirped. We thought we'd surprise you again. I tried to smile. Another visit so soon? Family shouldn't need a reason, she said. But the way she said it sounded rehearsed. Luke grunted, tossing a newspaper on the table. We were talking, Mom, about fairness. Fairness? I asked softly. Yeah, he said. Dad always said the farm was for us too. But now you've sold it, and we haven't seen a dime. I took a slow breath. Luke, the money isn't a gift to take or split. It's my savings. For the foundation, for repairs. Vanessa suddenly slammed a hand on the table, her voice cracking like lightning. Mom, why are you doing this to us? We're your children. You know how much Derek and I are struggling. You know. Her eyes glistened, tears that came too easily, too perfectly timed. For a second, I almost believed them. Almost. Vanessa, I said gently, this isn't about love or trust. It's about doing the right thing with what your father built. She sniffed, dabbing her eyes. So we're just strangers now? Is that it? Luke pushed away from the counter. Don't twist it, Mom. We're just saying, it doesn't make sense for you to keep all that money. You're retired. You don't even need it. The words landed like stones. Retired. Old. Useless. I'd spent my whole life raising them, building a world that would keep them safe, and now they spoke like investors discussing a poor return. I tried to stay calm. You both have your own lives now. You'll manage. Luke's laugh was short and bitter. Oh, we'll manage, all right. Especially once you stop hiding what's ours. Before I could speak, Vanessa's phone buzzed. She turned away, whispering into the receiver. I caught only fragments. Yeah, she's not signing yet. I know. Just send it. Then she hung up and smiled as if nothing happened. Mom, she said, pulling a folded paper from her purse. Can you just sign this? It's something Derek's accountant sent. Just for tax purposes. You'll save a few hundred on the sale paperwork. I reached for the paper. The text was dense, legal terms, small print, unfamiliar language. My name was there, followed by lines about transferring primary financial authority and joint account authorization. This isn't about taxes, I said. Looking up slowly, Vanessa's smile faltered. Mom, please. Don't make this hard! Luke slammed his fist on the table, the sound sharp and final. For God's sake, just sign it. The tea glass beside me tipped over, shattering on the floor. The sound made me flinch, not from fear, but from grief. I looked at my children, my own flesh and blood, and realized I didn't recognize them anymore. My voice trembled, but stayed steady. No, Luke stepped forward, towering. What did you say? I said no. I'm not signing anything. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Vanessa turned away sharply, muttering something to Luke I couldn't catch. He kicked the broken glass aside and stormed out the back door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the mess. The tea soaked into the floorboards, dark and sticky, like something living. Vanessa followed him out a moment later, not saying goodbye. When the door shut behind them, the silence that filled the room was heavy, suffocating. That night, I locked my bedroom door. My hand still throbbed from the old fracture, the ache flaring when I tried to twist the knob. But this pain was different. It wasn't physical anymore. It was the kind that seeps into your ribs and stays there. I sat on the edge of my bed, trembling. Not from fear, from anger. They had come not for love, not for family, but for possession. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to before. They weren't going to stop. Around midnight, a light flashed through the curtains. A car parked across the road, idling, headlights off, engine faintly humming, watching. I told myself it was just someone turning around. But when it didn't move for 10 long minutes, I started to wonder who was really watching whom. The next morning, Clara stopped by. She brought fresh bread and the kind of calm that comes from a lifetime of knowing when something's wrong. Evie, she said, studying my face, you look like you haven't slept. I haven't, I admitted. They came again. They wanted me to sign something, and now there are calls from people claiming to be from social services. Asking if I'm managing on my own. Clara frowned, setting the bread down. What kind of questions? They asked if I forget to pay bills if I ever leave the stove on. They said they were checking for signs of cognitive decline. Clara's jaw tightened. Evie, that's not social services. That's them. They're trying to declare you unfit. If they can prove you're not of sound mind, they can take control of your finances. The room tilted slightly. Take control, I repeated, the words scraping against my throat. She nodded grimly. I've seen it before. They're setting up a guardianship case. I pressed a hand against my chest, feeling my heartbeat stutter. They wouldn't. But even as I said it, I knew they would. Derek, smart, charming, always working angles. This was exactly his kind of cruelty. After Clara left, I stood by the window, staring at the mailbox swaying in the wind. Something inside me whispered not to look, not yet, but I couldn't help it. I walked down the path, the gravel crunching under my slippers, and opened the box. Inside lay a single white envelope, stamped with official seals. My name in bold letters across the top. Notice of guardianship petition, mental health evaluation pending. The world seemed to go quiet all at once. The wind stopped. The birds stopped. Even the trees held their breath. For a moment I just stood there, the paper trembling in my hands. Then I looked back at the house, my house, and felt the walls watching, as if they already knew what was coming. I whispered into the still air. So this is how they plan to take me. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I just went inside, locked every door, and began to plan. The storm rolled in just after midnight, the kind that rattled the windows and made the old farmhouse creak like it remembered every argument it had ever heard. Rain streaked down the glass, and thunder grumbled over the hills. I was sitting in my chair by the kitchen table, the guardianship notice still lying there like a loaded weapon. Each drop that hit the roof sounded like a countdown. Then came the pounding, heavy, relentless. Luke's voice, muffled by the storm but unmistakable. "Mom, open the damn door!" My stomach twisted. I'd known this moment was coming. I just hadn't expected it so soon. I stood, heart hammering. "Go home, Luke." I called through the door. "It's late. Don't you lock me out, Mom." "We're not finished." Behind his voice, another one rose, softer, shaking. "Luke, please." "Stop yelling." "Vanessa," I hesitated. My hand hovered over the lock. Some foolish part of me still hoped they'd calm down, that maybe they were just here to talk. But the pounding grew louder, more desperate. Then came the slam, wood splintering, hinges groaning. The door burst open, rain blowing in with them. Luke stumbled inside, soaked and reeking of whiskey. His eyes were wild, not just angry, but lost. Vanessa followed, clutching her coat, tears already spilling. "Luke, please," she begged. "This isn't how we fix it." "Fix it?" he barked. "You think she's gonna fix it? She's hoarding money that belongs to us." I backed away slowly, one hand on the counter. "You need to leave. Both of you, right now." "Not until you sign the papers," Luke said, pulling a crumpled document from his jacket pocket. It was smeared, damp, the ink bleeding from the rain. I shook my head. "I told you already, I'm not signing anything." He took a step forward. "Mom, don't make this harder." "Harder?" I said quietly. "Luke, I carried you in my arms when you couldn't walk. I fed you when I could barely feed myself. And now you're—" He cut me off with a shout that cracked through the thunder. "Then do it again. Take care of us like you're supposed to." The words hit harder than the storm outside. Vanessa was crying openly now. "Luke, stop! You're scaring her." He turned on her, face twisted. "You wanted this too? You said we needed the money." "Not like this," she cried, but he was already moving. I stepped back, raising my hand as if that could stop the fury pouring out of him. "Luke," I said softly, "you need to go home. Sleep it off. We'll talk tomorrow." But he was past reason. His hand shot out, grabbing my arm, the same arm that had never quite healed right from before. Pain shot up my wrist like lightning. "Let go," I gasped, struggling to pull free. "Just sign it," he shouted. The room tilted. The table shifted beneath my elbow. Vanessa lunged forward, screaming, "Luke, stop!" And then chaos. A shove. A stumble. The floor rushing up to meet me. The crack echoed through the room, sharp, wet, final. I didn't even feel it at first. Just shock, the silence after thunder. Then came the pain, blooming fast, cruel and absolute. My hand, my left hand, twisted under me at an angle that didn't belong to the human body. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Even Luke stopped shouting. His face drained of color as he stared at me lying there. Vanessa's voice broke the silence. "Oh my God." "Mom, but she didn't move, didn't kneel." "Didn't reach, just stood there, hands shaking, eyes wide with horror and guilt." I forced the words out through clenched teeth. "Get out." Luke opened his mouth, but I cut him off, louder this time, stronger. I said, "Get out." It wasn't a plea. It was an order, the kind mothers give when they stop begging and start surviving. They hesitated for only a second, before stumbling toward the door. Vanessa kept glancing back, whispering, "I didn't mean for this to happen." Luke grabbed her arm, pulling her into the rain. The door slammed behind them, leaving only the sound of thunder and my own ragged breathing. For a long time, I didn't move. The world had narrowed to pain and the slow ticking of the wall clock. Then, through the window, headlights flashed, steady, calm, cutting through the chaos. Clara. She burst in seconds later, umbrella forgotten, eyes wide. "Evelyn!" "What happened?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed at my hand. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling beside me. "Let's get you to the hospital." The drive was slow, each bump a fresh stab of agony. I stared out the window at the rain-blurred fields and thought of Robert. "Is this what you meant, love? That the land would take care of me, even if it had to break me first?" At the hospital, everything turned clinical. Lights too bright, voices too soft. They whisked me into an examination room, cut away my sleeve, and wrapped my mangled wrist in cool plaster. The doctor, a man with tired eyes, spoke gently. "Fracture of the metacarpal bones. We'll need to keep it immobilized for 6 weeks." I nodded numbly, too exhausted to cry. When he returned with the paperwork, his tone had changed. "Careful, almost hesitant, Mrs. Carter," he said quietly. "There's something odd." I looked up, wary. "Odd?" He hesitated. "Your daughter already filed some medical authorization forms in your name. Claimed you'd been mentally unstable, said she was managing your care." The words hit harder than any fall. My vision swam, my heart pounded. "She what?" He sighed. "I thought it was unusual, so I didn't approve anything yet. But you should know. She's trying to establish legal guardianship." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The cast on my hand felt heavier by the second, the weight of betrayal pressing into bone. I turned my gaze toward the window. Rain still streaking down, thunder rumbling far away, and whispered the only thing that made sense anymore. They broke my hand to steal my name. Pain has a strange way of focusing the mind. When your body refuses to move, your thoughts learn to fight for you. The day after they set my cast, I sat by the window with a notepad on my lap and a pen wedged awkwardly between my fingers. Every movement hurt, but I welcomed it. Pain meant I was still alive, still in control of something they hadn't stolen. Clara came over that morning with coffee, and the quiet determination of a woman who's seen enough of life to know when someone's been wronged. She didn't ask for permission. She just walked in, looked at my hand, and said, "We're going to document everything." She laid out her old digital camera, the kind nurses used before smartphones took over, and began taking pictures. The bruises along my wrist, the scrape on my temple, even the dent in the kitchen floor where I'd fallen. "Proof," she said, clicking steadily. "People like Derek count on silence." "Silence is what let this happen," I muttered. She gave me a look. "Then let's make some noise." That afternoon, she introduced me to Mr. Holloway, a retired lawyer who'd returned to work after his own mother suffered financial abuse. His office smelled of old paper and peppermint. Books lined the walls in neat, aging rows. He listened more than he spoke, his pen tapping lightly on the desk as I told him everything: the farm sale, the manipulations, the guardianship notice, even the night my hand broke. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. "Mrs. Carter, I've handled a lot of elder abuse cases. Yours has teeth. They forged documents, used intimidation, and filed a fraudulent guardianship claim. That's a felony." The word felony felt foreign on my tongue. It didn't sound like my children, but maybe that was the problem. They weren't my children anymore. Not the way they used to be. Mr. Holloway continued. "Do you have any evidence linking them to the fraudulent paperwork?" "Not yet," I said, "but I know where to find it." That night, Clara and I began gathering everything we could. She went through my call logs, reading each number aloud as I cross-checked. There were several from an unknown number listed as social services. Outreach. Mr. Holloway confirmed later that it was a disposable VoIP line registered under Derek's company. Then came the paperwork, old emails, copies of the property sale, bank statements showing the deposit, and buried inside my trash folder, one email from Derek's personal address forwarding guardianship template forms. That was the moment I stopped shaking. They wanted to take everything, I said quietly. I was done letting them. Over the next few days, we built a wall of evidence. Clara photographed every bruise, every forged signature. I recorded voicemail messages, Luke's slurred apologies, Vanessa's soft pleas that this isn't what you think. And through it all, the ache in my hand throbbed like a reminder of what they'd already taken. When Mr. Holloway met us again at the house, his briefcase was heavier than before. "You've done good work," he said, "but you need to prepare yourself. Once I file this, it becomes public record. Your children will know you're pressing charges." I swallowed hard. "Let them." They chose this path. He gave me a long look, the kind that weighs your resolve before trusting it. Then he nodded. "All right. We'll start with a police inquiry." That evening, 2 officers came by to take my statement. They moved carefully through the house, photographing the broken door, the shattered glass under the rug, the storm's remnants still clinging to the porch. One of them, a young woman with tired eyes, said gently, "Mrs. Carter, you're not alone. We see this more often than you'd think. Greed makes people do ugly things." Her words settled deep. I realized for the first time that this wasn't just my story. It was something bigger, something that happened behind too many closed doors. Within a week, things started to move. The police contacted the bank. They traced Derek's email activity to multiple forged filings under my name. Luke received a formal notice of investigation, and Vanessa, my sweet, foolish girl, began calling daily. At first it was anger, then guilt, then silence. Derek, on the other hand, wasn't quiet. Mr. Holloway showed me an intercepted email chain between him and someone labeled LW, Luke's initials. "Keep her calm until I move the funds. If she talks to a lawyer, we're finished." He was growing paranoid. And paranoia, Mr. Holloway said, was often the first sign of a guilty man about to fall. Still, the nights were the hardest. The house felt larger than ever. Each creak, another memory turned ghostly. Sometimes I'd sit awake, replaying every argument, every missed warning. I'd remember Luke's laughter as a child, Vanessa's bedtime hugs, the promises we made to stay a family no matter what. But promises mean nothing when they're written in greed instead of love. Clara stayed over most nights now. She'd read aloud from her old mystery novels, trying to keep the air light, but the tension never fully left. We were waiting for something, a call, a signal, the next wave. It came on a Thursday night, just after 10 p.m. The storm outside had finally cleared, and the world was quiet again. The phone rang. Mr. Holloway's voice was calm, but firm. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "we have enough to file criminal charges. Derek's paper trail ties directly to the fraudulent guardianship and the financial coercion. Once I submit this tonight, your children will be arrested by morning." My hand tightened around the receiver, the cast pressing against my ribs. The words hung in the air. "Heavy and final. Are you ready for that?" he asked softly. For a long moment I couldn't answer. I looked toward the family photographs lining my wall. Birthdays, holidays, smiling faces that no longer felt like mine. Then I said, quietly but clearly, "Yes, I'm ready." The courthouse smelled of old wood and nerves. Every step I took echoed down the marble hall, slow and deliberate, the sound of a woman walking toward the truth, no longer afraid of it. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters called my name, shouting questions about the Maple Hollow exploitation case. Their words felt foreign, like I was starring in someone else's tragedy. Elder exploitation. Once I was just a mother. Now I was a headline. Inside, the courtroom hummed with whispers. Rows of strangers filled the benches. Neighbors, townsfolk. People who used to wave from their porches and now watched me like I was a story worth remembering. At the front sat Derek. Clean-shaven and smug, his lawyer whispering in his ear. Vanessa sat beside him, pale and brittle, eyes swollen. Luke was alone. No lawyer yet, just folded hands and a stare fixed on the floor. When the bailiff called my name, the room fell still. I took the stand, hand trembling slightly as I raised it to swear in. The cast had come off, but the ache never truly left. The bones still remembered. Mr. Holloway nodded to me from the table, calm as always. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "can you tell the court, in your own words, what happened the night of June 17th? So I did. I spoke of the storm, of the shouting, of the shove, of the moment love cracked louder than bone. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just told it plain, like reading aloud from a diary I wished I'd never written. When I finished, you could hear a pin drop. Even the court stenographer paused her keys. Then came the evidence. Mr. Holloway laid out the emails, Derek's chain of correspondence showing forged psychiatric reports, falsified bank documents, the fake guardianship filings, page after page of proof, each line another nail sealing the coffin of their lies. "Mr. Holloway," the judge said, adjusting her glasses, "are you telling this court that the defendants conspired to have Mrs. Carter declared mentally unfit for the purpose of seizing her assets?" "Yes, Your Honor," he replied, "and the evidence speaks for itself." It did. Derek's forged signatures matched perfectly with samples from his previous contracts. The notary stamp? Fake. The doctor's note claiming I was showing cognitive decline? Signed by a clinic that didn't exist. Derek tried to smile through it. He failed. When Clara took the stand, I felt something swell inside me. Pride, maybe. Or gratitude that some people still remembered how to be good. She sat tall, hands folded neatly. "I've known Evelyn Carter for 32 years, she said. "She is of sound mind, strong will, and sharper memory than most people half her age. What her family did wasn't care. It was control." Her voice didn't waver once. "Not even when Derek's lawyer tried to shake her." "She's telling the truth," Clara said simply, "and the photographs I took prove it. When they displayed the pictures, the bruises, the swollen hand, the cracked floor tile, there was a collective gasp in the room. I didn't look away, neither did Luke." Halfway through Derek's cross-examination, Luke suddenly stood. "Stop!" he shouted, voice breaking. "Just stop!" All eyes turned to him. Tears streaked down his face as he looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since that night. "I did it," he said hoarsely. "I hurt her. She told me to leave and I still—" He broke off, shaking. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was drunk and stupid and—" The judge struck her gavel. "Mr. Carter, you will have your turn." But Luke just sank back down, shoulders shaking, guilt spilling faster than tears. And then Vanessa cracked. Her sobs filled the silence he left behind. "He made us do it," she cried, pointing at Derek. "He said Mom was hiding money. He said we could lose everything if we didn't act. I thought we were protecting her." Derek turned toward her, snarling under his breath, but it was too late. "The damage was done." Mr. Holloway rose calmly. "Your Honor, the defendants have just corroborated our evidence. They acted under Derek Palmer's coercion, but willingly participated in fraud and assault." The judge leaned forward, her tone firm. "I've presided over many family disputes, but this—" She paused, eyes sweeping the room. "This is a betrayal of sacred trust. You took the one person who gave you life and tried to strip her of her dignity for profit. The court finds Derek Palmer guilty of fraud, coercion, and conspiracy. Luke and Vanessa Carter, guilty of assault and complicity in elder abuse." Her gavel came down with a sound that shook the air. 3 strikes for 3 broken. Bonds. The hearing ended in a blur, reporters rushing, cameras flashing again. The rain outside had turned to sunlight, slicing through the courthouse windows like some quiet mercy. I gathered my papers slowly. My hand still ached when I moved it, but this time the pain didn't feel like weakness. It felt like proof that I had survived them. As I stepped into the corridor, I heard her. "Mom?" Vanessa stood a few feet away, trembling, mascara streaking down her face. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Can you ever forgive me?" For a moment, everything stopped. The noise, the footsteps, even the light. I looked at her, at the daughter I'd once rocked to sleep, now standing in the ruins of her own choices. My eyes burned, but I said nothing, not yet. Spring came slow that year, like the earth itself was learning to breathe again. The snow melted from the hills in quiet retreat, and the lilacs by my window began to bloom for the first time since Robert passed. The scent drifted through the open pane, soft, forgiving, alive. It had been 6 months since the trial. 6 months since the gavel came down and the truth finally spoke louder than the lies. My hand still ached on cold mornings. The doctors said it would never fully heal. The bones had fused slightly crooked. But when I looked at it, I didn't see weakness anymore. I saw survival. Every line, every scar, a record of what love had cost and what strength had returned to claim its place. I sat at the old oak desk by the window, sunlight warm against my skin, and wrote out the first official donation check from the Lydia Grace Fund. The pen wobbled a little between my fingers, but the signature came steady. I smiled faintly, whispering, "There you go, Lydia, it's finally real." The foundation had become more than I'd dreamed. Clara handled the coordination, volunteers, hospital outreach, paperwork. She said it kept her young. I told her it just kept her honest, and Vanessa, she came every morning now, quiet, humble, apron tied loosely as she arranged flowers on the reception desk or helped serve coffee to patients' families. She never tried to explain what she'd done. She didn't need to. Sometimes she'd pause by my side, brush a bit of dust from the counter and murmur, "Need anything, Mom?" I'd shake my head and smile. That was enough. Forgiveness, I'd learned, doesn't always arrive with grand speeches. Sometimes it just shows up with clean hands and tries again. Luke wrote from prison last month, a letter folded 3 times, the handwriting shaky, like a man trying to learn himself again. I hadn't opened it right away. The envelope sat on the table for days, watching me from across the room like it was waiting for permission. That morning, I finally did. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I remember everything. The smell of hay after the rain, you singing while you cooked, Dad laughing in the barn. I thought I was fighting for what was mine, but I was really running from who I became. You didn't deserve what I did. Nobody does. When I get out, I want to help with the fund, even if it's just fixing the leaky roof or mowing the lawn. Maybe that's how I start being your son again. I'm sorry. Luke." I read it twice before folding it back and setting it beside Lydia's photograph, the same one I kept near my writing lamp. She looked at me through that frame with her usual calm, eyes bright, lips curved in that half-smile that always seemed to say, "You'll know what to do when the time comes." And I did. I didn't know if I could ever forget, but I could forgive, piece by piece, quietly like mending a tear in an old quilt. Some things weren't meant to be perfect again. They were meant to be whole in a different way. By late afternoon, the center emptied. Clara locked up, Vanessa waved goodbye, and the halls went still except for the ticking clock and the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I walked out to the garden behind the building, where the lilacs grew thick and fragrant along the fence line. The air shimmered with sunlight, warm and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look softer, even memory. I reached down, brushing a bloom with my bandaged hand. It didn't bend easily, but it moved enough to touch, enough to feel. My hand never healed the way it used to, I whispered to the flowers. But maybe that's fitting. It reminds me that love, when tested by greed, either breaks or becomes unbreakable. A soft wind passed through, stirring the petals. For a moment, I could almost hear Lydia's voice carried in it, gentle as ever. "You see, Evie? Love wins when money fails." I smiled through the tears. The garden shimmered. And somewhere beyond it, life went on. Buses rumbling in the distance. Laughter spilling from a nearby park. A child calling for their mother. Ordinary sounds, but to me they felt sacred. Proof that the world still held good things worth protecting. As I turned to go back inside, the sunlight caught the silver bracelet on my wrist, a small charm engraved with one word, Grace, a gift from Vanessa last week. Simple, honest, no apology attached. Just a beginning. I closed the door behind me, the scent of lilac trailing in, and whispered one last time, not to Robert, not even to Lydia, but to the life that had tested me and somehow left me standing. They broke my hand, but not my will, and for the first time in a long time, I knew that was enough. Thanks for listening. If this story touched you, take a moment to breathe. And remember, sometimes the strongest people are the ones who rebuild quietly after everyone else walks away. Evelyn's pain may have broken her bones, but not her spirit. And in the end, it wasn't revenge that healed her. It was grace. If you've ever had to find peace after being betrayed, share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear they're not alone. And if you believe, like Evelyn, that love wins when money fails, hit the like button, subscribe to her side of the story, and join us again for another tale of resilience, truth, and redemption.